Chris and Juliana, thanks so much for joining us. Chris, if I could start with you, and maybe you could just expand a little bit on your background and how you're approaching, this topic. Why is the topic of retention important to you this year?
Sure, absolutely. It's always been important to me. I think it's about culture, right? And so you can't retain your team members if you don't create a culture in which team members can grow. So it's about culture. It's about enabling teams to support customers and overall success. If you have a constant revolving door of people, you can establish that culture and you can establish long-term relationships with customers. And so, it's really crucial that we create environments that our sales teams can thrive in. That takes the form of coaching, mentoring, empowering teams, recognizing them, leading from the front, providing the teams exposure, and helping to remove barriers. One of the things that I personally pride myself on is dropping everything at times when there's an emergency going on with a customer and getting my hands dirty so we can ultimately solve the customer problem. And with that, that creates a culture, and that creates respect of the sales teams to want to deliver 150% when they have a leader that's willing to go to the mat with them. It's also giving exposure to leadership. I'm sure we've all had jobs in the past where you didn't feel like you were getting the level of leadership and exposure to senior management. So it's giving opportunities for team members to continue to, showcase their work to higher ups. And I'd say bottom line, it's about making your organization a destination where people can continue to thrive, learn, and grow their careers.
That's great, Chris. Well, what a fantastic way to kick us off. And there's a lot to unpack there. We'll talk about some of those specific topics as we go along. And I think really the focus on the people, right? That we have to understand what makes them tick, what's motivating to them. And as you said, whether that's building a career path or building that next chapter for them, and really having the one I've heard that's resonated, people leave for a lot of different reasons. There's about 4 million people every month. And as they're moving around, we have to think about, well, they're probably leaving for 4 million different reasons. So, having the conversations about what's important to them and then being able to respond to that. And what is interesting, what I didn't hear you say is, giving them metrics to hit or managing, just to the scorecard, right? This is about the people aspect, and we're going to get into that a lot more. Juliana, maybe you could share as well a little bit about your perspective on the topic. Why is this important, and what are some of the things you're hearing?
Yeah, of course it is something that, and Ray, you're probably hearing this across clients as well. Everyone's talking about it, right? There's been a lot of attrition at a lot of different companies for, I think, various reasons. As you just said, it's not kind of a one size fits all, but there are different reasons. We are walking through this interesting phase, pandemic, post-pandemic, whatever you want to call it, where everything's still different and companies are making different decisions on how people are working and where they're working, and the culture that they're kind of almost recreating in some ways because we're going through so much change. And I think, to Chris's point, it comes down to people, right? We are all people at the end of the day. I think that inherently people want to feel value at work. They want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to be a part of something greater. And what I would also, plug in there, retention's an interesting thing, right? We want to retain the majority of people, and we all know it is very expensive to have turnover. There's always going to be some good attrition, and then B, finding talent right now in this market is extremely difficult because there is so much movement. And, I've been getting it from our own recruiter just as late as last night and this morning, where 4 people are gone out of our pipeline, and now another one this morning. And she's like, whoa, this market is so hot right now. And, in the knowledge working areas that we work in, we're seeing this actually heat up even more than where it was at the beginning of the year when we were kind of talking about it. I would say at the end of last year, beginning of this year, when it became a really hot topic. So I think there's so much to unpack in this retention and what it looks like, as you said, and the good parts, the bad parts, and the things that we can do as leaders. So I'm excited to jump in on it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think, your point, the best way to address the recruiting challenge is to keep people from leaving in the first place. So, if we can inoculate or do some things. And I read a really interesting, there's an article in Inc. about mental health, which we're going to get to and talk about that aspect of it. But the other side, just read recently about the idea, one, we should assume that our people are getting recruited, in this market. They are getting calls. And the question is, do they return the call? Do they even think about it? Is it something they're interested in? And are we doing those things to get ahead of that? And I heard a really interesting idea of, are we doing stay interviews? We talk about exit interviews, but I love the idea of a stay interview. In other words, how often are we checking in with our people saying, hey, how's this going for you? What's going to keep you here? Or how can we make this an environment where you want to be a part of it? And let's do those things that are going to give them, right, a vision and reason to stick around or not jump because they're going to make 10% more somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the other last thing I would add is I've done a bunch of research on Gen Z as well. And, be ready. They won't stay if they don't like it. Right. And if they're not treated well, and if they're not culturally aligned to the company. And you said something about this earlier, it used to be that people left because of their manager. That was the direct correlation primarily with the retention. And I think to your point, it is changing, and the culture of the company and the values of the company are becoming just as important as somebody's day-to-day manager.
Absolutely. And we need to get ahead of that and think more about it. So before we jump into the topics in more detail, I'd love to get feedback from the audience. I'm going to launch a very short poll, and this is related to the agenda items that were in the webinar invite. But in terms of things that are important to you attending with us today, is it about keeping your top sales talent? Is it about addressing, maybe burnout or some mental health challenges? Is it about challenges with hybrid work? So as you said, Juliana, we're not going back to where we were. We're going back to some mix. We're not maybe sure what that looks like, but there are unique challenges even compared to 2 years ago where we were, where maybe it was more like 100% hybrid or 100% remote. But now we have additional challenges of going back and forth and shifting and expectations, and what does that look like? So I see people weighing in here. This will be really interesting to get a feeling. Chris, I'll put you on the spot here, but if you think about keeping talent, about burnout, about hybrid work, some of those things, what's top of mind for you? What are some of the things you're thinking about with keeping your team?
I kind of go back to the culture, and I've seen in my past experience when a culture wasn't cohesive, and that was the time when we saw a lot of people wanting to leave a team, whether they wanted to move to a new organization internally or whether they wanted to go external. They didn't feel a part of something bigger. Maybe the leader wasn't leading with empathy. Treating them like a human being and managing with a stick and not just, a carrot. They weren't being recognized. Someone else was taking credit for their work. They weren't getting any exposure. Or they hit a ceiling on growth, right? They didn't see that there was a growth opportunity within that organization to continue to grow their career, whether it be to learn something new and or to get promoted. And it reminds me of an example earlier in my career of a time when I wanted to leave a situation. I had a boss who would cancel meetings. And one of those meetings, I had one of my team members, and we were sitting there waiting for 20 minutes, and he apparently got a more important phone call from someone more senior, and we were sitting in his office for 20 minutes, and had one of my team members who had spent probably months on a really crucial strategic presentation that we were providing to him on a new business idea. We walked out, we gave it the 20-minute rule, which is a huge courtesy,
Right.
stepped out, ultimately rescheduled. We had to redo the presentation extensively because months more of results had gone by and new business information. That's not how you create a fan club, right? You need to be a servant leader. You need to treat someone the same, whether they're the floor sweeper or the CEO. And you need to support your team and lead with empathy.
Wow. Well, that is great. Such a great story because it resonates, right? I mean, how many years ago, and it sticks with you. And I think those are the ones where the unfortunately bad impression wipes out a lot of the good work that a manager may do, because those are the things that people remember how they feel and how they respond. And I think, we can talk about those and where we've had good coaches and bad coaches, and can we do those things that are adding to the trust and emotional bank account, right? And not withdrawing or not creating those situations, where people feel frustrated and start to remember. So no, that's a great example. Let me go ahead and end the poll here. And I'll share the results. So this is interesting, not surprising, because the whole topic is really around keeping your talent and retention. So about half of the audience said, yeah, they really want to hear about that. But interesting that the rest is split between want to talk a little bit about burnout and mental health, and that is real, and I'm anxious to get into that. And then also, hybrid work. What are we doing? How are we evolving? And so we'll get some feedback from the audience there as well. But it sounds like we have the right agenda. We all of these kind of resonated to different levels. Let's continue on that. Juliana, I'd love to hear from you. If people are leaving, from your clients, and I know you work with organizations throughout the world. What are you hearing? What are some of the reasons they are hearing that they are leaving, and what are you doing, or what are they doing about it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons, and I think that kind of plays off what we said earlier, but one of them that we've heard consistently throughout the pandemic, and even just like at where we're at now, is the attainable goals. What's possible in the market that we're in for the industry that I'm in, and can I actually hit those goals? I think all of us, at work, and especially salespeople, they're motivated by these goals that are set out by the company and by their boss and want to hit them. And when things have been unattainable, and I think this gets into culture and some of the other parts, it just starts to feel like a slog, right? And work becomes not very fun. And you're not getting the wins that you want to. And then the rest of the world that you turn around to when you're done with your workday is negative. And there's so much that's not good coming out there, and the news is not good. I think those really wear on a salesperson specifically. And so a lot of what clients were looking at was, how can we break things down a bit more for people so that they can have more incremental wins versus, some bigger win or something that we set them up for thinking that it could happen. But honestly, in this environment, it's not going to happen. I know tech selling into retail in the beginning of the pandemic was just like, the whole conversation had to change overnight. And we were helping clients with decks on messaging, right? As we went out going, oh my gosh, we can no longer talk about all these amazing things that we see coming on the horizon. It's like, how do we figure out how to support our clients right now at this point in time? And so, and I think to Chris's point earlier too, a lot of the success came from the executives literally writing the messaging out themselves with their teams, and making really ugly PowerPoints because they needed to be in it on the ground floors, because, the salespeople are our interface between the clients, right? They see both sides day to day. So I think a large part is just about how can we make sure that people can win in this economy? And there were parts of the, different industries that are winning big time, and then those that were not. And I think recognizing the economic forces around it as a company and making adjustments for your sales teams makes a huge difference. The other thing I would say is, to your point, and we heard from one of our large clients that when the mandate came in that we were back to the offices, they had over 30% in attrition 1 month. And it was like, whoa. And what they found out was people moved. and they moved where there were no offices, but they just hadn't told anybody, right? Which we could do, like our backgrounds can be fake. And, we had all these different things that were happening, and all of our client calls are now, via video, or, we aren't going to see people. And so I do think figuring out the hybrid work and understanding what it actually means from a seller's perspective and what they want, both as a team and as individuals, is going to help greatly with retention through where we're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna get back to the hybrid work world. And I think, it is challenging, right? As a business owner, I feel that, and we see it. Like, how do you still want to produce the business results? You obviously still need to get work done. And how can we do that and be sensitive to people's, unique situations? And also looking back of, okay, what worked over the last 2 years? We have survived, those of us who are still around, right? So yeah, let's build on that. Chris, I know, communication and engaging with your team is really important. And this is a little off script, but I'd love to get any thoughts you have about how do you celebrate wins with your team? And to Juliana's point, it may be frustrating because we don't get that big win, or it may take longer, or for a while nobody was buying anything or picking up the phone, so it wasn't a great time to be a salesperson. But how do you get those interim steps, or the things that you're doing to celebrate success with your team?
Well, first of all, I'm very client focused, and I do have like a huge base of customers all over the world. Uh, so that being said, I can't be involved in the day-to-day of every single one of those clients, but I try to be. And so my dance card's pretty full just over the next couple of months with, executive briefings and things like that. And so I try to be as much a part of some of the really crucial big accounts as possible. However, my team's empowered, and they're rock stars, and they're amazing. And we celebrate new launches and new logos. We celebrate growth. We celebrate when a team member has gotten to a new C-level decision maker, perhaps. And then we also celebrate when solution selling occurs in a really interesting way, right? And so it's one thing to make your number, and that's fantastic, and you will get lots of kudos and rewards for that. But it takes it to a whole nother level when I see a sales leader get to a breakthrough decision maker that can be transformational, and see a sales team successful with putting together almost like an impossible solution that doesn't exist to serve a customer need. We have regular rallies where we celebrate this in all hands meetings. We have regular best practice sharing forums. And so I personally have monthly meetings, grow the business type meetings with skip levels, so the team members can share not only how they're doing and I can get a view of their funnel, but the best part of the meeting is that they share their best practices with one another. And there's also SPIF programs that are out there. So there's always that good, friendly, healthy leaderboard type competition. And out of that, we really look to glean the best successes of, who are the sales teams that are doing it right. So all tides can rise. I really, there's a what and a how in terms of the way I've always looked at leadership and the best of the best, and the what is great. But when you deliver on the what, and you've like poisoned the water and you're holding your poker cards up, I really much prefer the team members that are sharing their best practices so that all tides can rise. And those are the types of people that ultimately end up getting promoted over time, because they're not afraid to compete. They're very comfortable with sharing so everyone can get better.
Yeah, well, and I really love the idea of celebrating those interim successes. And we talk about in our sales management program the idea of you have to manage behaviors and results. It's one thing to look at the scorecard and say, well, we didn't get there, but what are those things that are going to lead to the results we're looking for? And if we can celebrate those, like a creative way of getting access or a great solution presentation, let's celebrate what good looks like and let others know. And we've seen some really creative ways of sharing that through video, through online or discussion groups, let's share those with each other so that we can collaborate what's working, especially since the environment seems to be changing kind of day to day.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, let's build on that a little bit. One specific area of retention that I think is important to look at is with women in sales. And, there's certainly been a lot of attention, a lot of focus. I think it's been especially hard if somebody's at home managing the household. We've got kids working at home. There are additional challenges, as we know. And it seems like a topic that hasn't gotten, but is getting some additional attention. Juliana, maybe you can kick us off. I know you're on panels and other discussion groups, and Chris, you have some initiatives in place. Let's talk about that, and I'm going to step back and listen.
Yeah, I think it's such a great topic. And I would say if you don't follow Cynthia Barnes on LinkedIn, yeah, I know Ray and I both do, you should follow her. She has started a group for women in sales specifically and about elevating and also educating people about what it means to be a woman in sales. And, I think ultimately what I've learned a lot from her, being also a woman that sells, right? But she brings it to the masses and to like many different companies and what can work. But I think, first of all, it's different for women. We sell differently. We interact with customers differently. I think I hear it from Chris, I don't always hear the men in sales speaking about the things that she has been speaking about here, which is recognizing people in small moments, the what and the how. That's a huge performance way to address performance. I think we have all been with the people that they can achieve the results and the what, and they're so strong, but man, getting there is ugly and not nice and makes it, kind of bitter for everybody when you do get that win. And I don't think that's the culture that any of us hopefully want to be a part of today. I know I definitely don't. And I think that women bring a holistic view of selling to customers. I would also say just, we buy a lot and are buyers and are becoming more and more in that buying category from a, seniority and levels and what we're seeing coming up into the workforce, which is amazing. And I think, getting to understand the things and the ways in which days run for women, I think is really important for managers because people don't ask us. And also we don't tend to want to say the things that we do because they tend to be family household responsibilities, which have not always been seen as okay or accepted in a corporate environment, which seems very odd. And I think the pandemic has been very helpful on this because people that didn't have to do those responsibilities all of a sudden had them sitting in their house all day long or around them and their team. And we had to confront the realities of that. And so I think women can be extremely successful in sales if they're given the right working environment to be successful. And I think that that's, Salesforce also did an amazing set of videos about sales. And there was one really compelling story about a woman in sales, and it literally tracked her days, multiple days. And, she's dropping kids off at daycare and then going to meet clients across the San Francisco Bridge or what, just making all those things meet. But the fact that she could work from home made everything possible. And this was before we were all working from home. But as we get back into that, like client meetings, traveling, which is picking up, I mean, we can see it. And luckily, our airlines are feeling it as well. And there, there's going to be a lot more turbulence, but those are, incredibly critical to making sure that women in sales can thrive and ultimately win for your business, which is always kind of baffling to me. It's like, you want to win, we want to win. Let's make it work then for everybody. But the conversation is just not even being had in a lot of organizations because it's not being recognized that there is a difference.
Yeah, no, it's great. And Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on that because I think the business case, I mean, one, it's the right thing to do. And maybe we haven't paid attention to how we make that, how we accommodate and how we make that successful. But I read a really interesting Gong study. I don't know if you've seen that, where they looked at literally hundreds of thousands of sales calls. And not surprisingly, they found that women listen more maybe big surprise, right? And as a result, though, their win rates were higher and they were more effective at negotiating. And I mean, there's data right behind that. So it's like, well, how do we take that and build on that next generation of sales professionals and keep them engaged and keep them on board? So Chris, I know you have some initiatives related to that. Do you want to comment on how you're addressing it?
Sure. And I'll just start by reflecting personally about earlier in my own career where I didn't really have a formal mentor. I don't know if there was even such a thing as like a formal mentor pairing. I mean, there were certainly leaders, both male and female, in my career that helped me tremendously along the way. But I've since given many talks on this about women in leadership and a safe place to talk about some of these things. And I try to inspire younger, up and coming female leaders around like all the things that you're thinking happened to me. I may be in some senior position now, but let me tell you, there are days where, I've lacked confidence and still lack confidence. Go back several years ago, I remember being in this like huge board meeting and I was like, I've got this comment. I think I want to tee it up. It's not fully formed thought. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't. Talk to myself out of it. Not 2 seconds later, a peer brought up the idea. It's not like I had whispered it to him, but he had the idea too, and God bless him. And he wasn't afraid to share the idea. And I'm like, and everyone was like, that's a great idea. And so the negative self-talk talked me out of it. And I remember one time very early in my career, I used to have to do lots of executive briefings. And it was one of the earlier ones. I had to speak with this C-level. And you could tell he was looking at me like, what is this young girl going to talk about regarding a deep technology discussion? And I was a deep subject matter expert in this topic, but I could see he was judging me with his eyes and kind of, multitasking with his iPhone and just kind of blatant sign of disrespect. And I just remember, and I share this, with other women to just try to inspire confidence. I'm like, that is the best presentation that day I ever gave in my entire career. Because I was like, bring it on, buddy. Let's go. The end of the presentation, we shook hands. He gave me his business card. That was amazing. And so it's important to carve out space with women so that they have a safe base to understand like what they're thinking and their insecurities. They're all things that have happened to all of us. One of the things that we have in my organization is the Women's Advocacy Circle. This existed before I joined the team. I was so passionate about it. They didn't have an executive sponsor. I became an executive sponsor because I was so excited. So I am their executive sponsor. There's 5 board members, there's 20 committee members, and there's hundreds of general members, females, and some really awesome male ally members that are super active participants as well. And we have monthly speakers to give the members exposure. We do newsletters to share awareness so that members can share information about themselves, best practices. We do formal mentor pairing, which I think is important because a lot of people don't understand, like, how do I even go about getting a mentor? I was just speaking with Tanya on our team yesterday, one of our committee members, and she's going to be kicking off a series formally about how our women leaders build their personal brand and build their board of directors. And the notion of board of directors is you need a mentor, you need a sponsor, but you also need a confidant, and just best practices on how to build the brand, how to build the board of directors to get ahead in your career. Yeah, that's something I've got a lot of passion about.
Yeah.
I think, Ray, if I can jump in here, Chris gave such a great example. And I think I had a similar story, very young in my career. It was my first sales job, and I got turned down by the company 2 times before I got hired because I didn't fit the mold of what they expected a salesperson to be, which was so like, they just asked me so many questions about quota and driving revenue like month over month and what the numbers were going to be. And I just kept saying, I just want to go sell it because I fully believe in what it is that we're selling. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to have these conversations with people and they're going to result in sales. And like, the hiring manager just like couldn't get his head wrapped around that and was like, she's not a seller. Like she won't sell. And finally, the founder of the company actually hired me and said, I know she can do this. I'm going to hire her. And like, it was great. And he could see past my inability to speak in the sales language that was expected of me. And then I told him I didn't want a quota because I didn't want to be limited by a number. I wanted to far exceed expectations. And I was worried that if I had a specific number, I would just meet it. And then I wouldn't go any further. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was just like to hang with me, just have a little bit of faith and let me do this. And I completely blew my numbers out in the first year and was super successful and had great relationships with our clients. And so I think that's what I mean by it's different and it might not be what you're used to. And so, really dig into the person and what their qualifications are and how they approach things versus thinking that there's some mold that works for everyone, because it's just a fallacy.
Ray, I've got to on one more time because
no, please do. And actually there's a resounding, so Jessica and Haiti both said, hey, that happened to me too. So yeah, definitely resonates. What were you going to add, Chris?
It hits a chord. Yeah, just one other to pile on. Very similar to the story that Juliana just shared. I once interviewed for a sales job early in my career, and the general manager said I wasn't hungry enough. He said he just didn't think I was hungry enough. I interviewed with another general manager around a similar time frame who did hire me. And at the end of the year, there was a national award trip. And of course, I blew my numbers out of the water. I saw the guy, I think his name was Nick, at the award trip. And I was like, hey, Nick, how are you? Remember me? So, yeah.
Right. No, it's great. And I mean, what I'm taking away from this as well is how important it is. If you had seen what that model might look like, and Chris, to your point, if you had a mentor or if you had other people you could follow, that might have made that easier, and also easier for the hiring manager to say, oh, it isn't a one size fits all. So I think that's really important to look at that. And one of the other things we've heard just about retention in general is, and you mentioned the Gen Z, Juliana, but people want a reason to stay. They want a vision for the future. Even a lecture we give to the sales certificate program here at University of Washington, we interviewed that class and asked what was important to them. And before compensation and travel and everything else, they wanted to know what the path looks like. Like, is this a place where I can hang my hat or that I can be successful? And so I think, tying it together with what you were just talking about, what does that successful female sales executive look like in the organization? It may not be the same path that everybody's used to, but being able to see and get behind that. And I think we need to be working really hard to work with the individual on what their path looks like and give them that reason, again, so that they don't get sold a bill of goods by somebody else who's going to give that to them in the interview or in the recruiting process. And it may or may not come to fruition, but if you're not having those conversations, you miss that opportunity, right?
And that's kind of the whole DEI thing, is the path is not the same as what we were used to, or what we've hired in the past. The paths are different. And so you need to we look for the difference in the resumes, not for the traditional, exact path. I think there's grit and resilience that comes through different paths. And I think and I'm hoping we just see more and more of it. And that, Gen Z is very, very hungry learners, and they want to learn and continue to learn and be challenged. It's one of the things that kind of defines their generation as well. And so we have to be ready for that, because if we don't have it as a company, they will go find it on their own.
I think very, very well said. And, from our sample size here of 2, we have 100% success rate of people who maybe didn't fit the typical mold, but then became top performers, right? So I think we really need to look at that and provide those opportunities, those models. So I want to keep us going because we definitely have a couple other topics I want to touch on, and one which, you know, maybe is a little bit more sensitive, but I think we need to be talking about it, is the mental health and burnout aspect. And especially with the hybrid situation or work from home situation, I think it's been challenging. And, you know, we've heard that across the board. And I just saw there's an article in Inc. that was just published. I'll provide a link to it, but it's really interesting that it talks about something like 76% of people they surveyed said they had some type of mental health challenges over the last 2 years. And I think about that with you know, our team, with our clients. It's like, how many of those are we aware of? And all the others that are going through it, but maybe we don't. And so I'd love to just touch on how are we addressing that? And I'll say up front with the caveat, not expecting anybody to be a therapist or counselor. In fact, we should avoid that. But what can we do as leaders and managers to understand and to provide the appropriate, you know, support and services? Chris, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I try to just think about, like, how does a human being like to be treated, and how do you like to be treated? How do I like to be treated, right? And so, some of the things that I do are along the lines of, like, well, how would I want to be treated? Um, one approach is one-on-one time is sacred time. And so making time for your direct reports is absolutely crucial. Don't cancel that. That's the easiest thing to take off the calendar if an emergency occurs. It really is. Oh, let's just push that out. So one-on-one time is absolutely sacred, and not like, okay, let's launch into your list. Like, how are you? Wow, your son just graduated from high school. That's awesome. Did you throw a big party? And how did it go? And, oh, are you going to be an empty nester now? Like, how do you feel about that? And just whatever. And what I did with my weekend. And so one-on-one time, and just, one of my last bosses, sometimes that's all it would be. Like, how's it going? And that's awesome. There's plenty of other meetings that are business oriented meetings. Another is encouraging balance. And it might sound like motherhood and apple pie, but, like, when I see someone working crazy hours, and it happens, you see it in emails, right? Even if you're not on a call with them, I will call it out. I will call it out. And I remember when I first started in this role with my current company, my boss called it out. She was like, yeah, I'm seeing emails, Costello, coming from at 10 p.m., not cool. And so, a lot of companies they'll just take as much as you want to give, right? You're the one in charge. I also used to be in a situation in my career where, like, vacation time was like cool, but a couple conference calls here and there, and make sure you're up to date on your emails. I try not to do that, and I definitely encourage my teams not to do that. With regards to the burnout thing. The next is don't micromanage. This could be a work from home or an in office kind of a comment. Is like, a lot of the teams that I lead are very seasoned leaders. They don't need to be micromanaged. And so give people the freedom, especially when they're working from home. Like, if you're squeezing in a load of laundry or doing the dishes in between conference calls, God bless, that's great, right? Or walking the dog. And we do try to squeeze in some in-person meetings. I was actually thrilled, just had an offsite with my team. We hadn't gotten together in, at least 9 months in person. We all formed in Austin, Texas, a couple of weeks ago. And it was like a homecoming. You see morale go up instantaneously. You see productivity go up instantaneously. Honestly, some people are, like, really happy with being able to work from home because they do have more work-life balance, and they're spending more time with their families, and they're spending more time, there's a crock pot in the background. They're on a business call on video, but there's a nice meal cooking in the background. And that's a beautiful thing.
Right. No, and I think that all lends itself right to the balance and to the mental health piece. And I think, I mean, you bring up a really important point of modeling what the behavior looks like that is balanced, right? And maybe that is the unplugging on the vacation or the taking time, hey, I'm on my walk, I'll get back to you, or even integrating that. I mean, I've had walking one-on-ones. I've gone and worked out with my team members, and it's like, hey, that's a nice way of getting out of the office or out of your home office, being together in a safe way, but encouraging some healthy activity. Julianne, I know you, I mean, you see it both as a business owner, as a client leader, and from your clients. What are you seeing with mental health and burnout?
Yeah, I would say hands down, everybody's dealing with it. Like every client that we talk to, all of a sudden somebody's out, and they're dealing with something. And so we've seen it across all of our client sets, and nobody's immune from it. And I think, to tag on to what Chris said, I think one of the best ways as a leader and a manager to try to help your people is to know them. We are all human beings, and we all eat dinner at night, or get up in the morning and brush our teeth, etc. And so how do we get to know people as individuals? Because I have found that balance means different things for everyone, and not everybody's life is the same, and not everybody lives it the same. And so knowing them on an individual basis helps you way more as a leader when something feels off and you go, that person used to be, my person that didn't get online late at night and was shut off. And now I'm starting to see late night activity from them. I wonder what's happening. And then in your next one-on-one, you can say, hey, I did see this. Yet I have somebody else on my team that 2 a.m. is very regular for her. And she doesn't want to be told not to be doing things at 2 a.m. because that's when she feels great about doing things. Right. And but she might not be online until 11, so,
Right.
So it's, if you understand people's kind of natural rhythm of working, how they get things done, and then start to see the differences happening, I think you can help them manage what it is that they need. If they need a day off, or if they need some extra help on something, or, whatever it is, it could be incremental. I will say, through the pandemic, I've also run into the more serious situations, and it's hard. It is very hard to navigate as a leader. I think in part because the hardest part is everybody can see it sometimes, and the person going through it can't see it. And I think that's just a part of probably our psychology protecting us, and trying to not go into a state of high needs. And we've used the, paid family leave for people so that they can get the time that they need, because we've all gone through some massive things, and we've had massive family, traumas happening during this time. And without really the tools of how to handle that, I had somebody that joined that has lost 5 family members through COVID. And you just don't even know what to say in those instances, right? It's just,
Yeah. Well, I think
that's a lot.
Right. No, and just unbelievable to try to deal with that, and while working, right, and balancing everything else that we've been talking about. And so I think, first being aware and understanding, and giving them space. And to your point, whether that's family leave or even just a mental health day, or a personal health day, hey, let's take that, or let's take that as an organization. I know a lot of companies are doing that after the end of the quarter, giving an extra day. So
yeah,
I think
we're trying to do like meetingless Fridays so that it's just working time, because I think we've all found that we just stack up and, meetings day in and day out, and people love it. They're like, oh my gosh, I get so much done, and it's so great. And I can have a meeting if I need to, but I can also get so much work done, and go into the weekend feeling like I'm not behind.
Yeah. And yeah, the whole idea of getting deep work done, right, without interruptions, which is a whole nother webinar topic. But
Totally.
I think, and Chris, you brought up just having the conversation, the check-in, and this isn't lip service, right? This is, oh, hey, how's it going? And then you're immediately onto the agenda. And I think one that kind of feels disingenuous, and also says, okay, that was just small talk. No, really, how are you doing? Let's really understand, and what challenges, and how is that going? I know you had some issues come up, or I know you're moving, or I know you've had these other, questions, and then trying to provide support. And again, that doesn't mean being a counselor, but I saw a former colleague of mine just got their mental health first aid responder certificate. And I thought, what a great way to shine a spotlight on that. She's an HR professional, but is somebody in the organization even aware that that exists? And I wasn't, but somebody who you can refer to, or you can bring in, or are we leveraging the resources that we have? One of our clients is actually having a mental health coach come in and talk about things to do, just to break up your day and make it a little bit more successful, and manage stress and sleep and all of those things. So yeah, I think we should be looking at that proactively, making it okay to talk about, and probably being a little vulnerable too. Like, this has been hard on all of us, and let's have the conversation, so that it doesn't become that, the majority of the people who haven't talked to their manager about it, or maybe aren't getting the help they need. So
I will say, Ray, just like one more plug for something that just happened, but yesterday, Brene Brown announced that she's going on a 3-month sabbatical, and she's giving 4 weeks off, paid time off, to her team while she does it. And I'm sure it's in the name of research also, is my guess. And I'm hoping we learn a lot from her when she comes back from that, and what it did and what it meant and what it looked like, because I think we still don't know, there are lots of little tools to use, and that's great. And it's coming out. And I think there's more to come on this topic, because we're just navigating new waters.
Yeah, no, that's, and what a great example, right? Of, yeah, that's okay. Or the sky.
I was like, I would like to know how you're doing this.
Yeah.
Tell me the details.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I know you touched on, and I want to be sensitive to our time, but you touched on some of the things you're doing, and it crosses over, right, from kind of the mental health and balance to managing that hybrid team and giving people space. And I'd love to hear actually from both of you, Chris, maybe you can start, what else are you doing to balance that when they aren't there, and then get together and maximize the time when they are? How are you working through that blended situation?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed is we talked about the one-on-ones, and that's absolutely crucial, right? But it's important to enable forums for people to connect virtually, because there's only so many get-togethers face-to-face, and many teams are all over the country or all over the world. And one thing that is working well right now is a forum that we have that is helping people to connect virtually, because it's it's like a self-served knowledge community of people that are using it. And it's because, video calls can feel so formal, right? Not jokey, like, let's get to the agenda. There's no, like, you're not going out to lunch afterwards and like laughing about something. And so it's a forum that we created. It's basically just our instant messaging forum, group chat, that allows the team to get immediate answers to be effective. And so it's super helpful. Like, hey, I have this thing going on with the customers. Have you had this happen? Or for new hires, right? Like, I barely know how to do my job. The experts are all on here. They'll answer questions and help them to be effective. But it also is just turned into like a family, these small, intimate chat groups where, not only are they constantly helping each other, but you'll see the occasional joke, right? You'll see the occasional picture posted, some goofy picture, and kudos, giving recognition to one another. And so this is something that is like a very active and constant chat room. And I choose to personally participate in some of these, not to be like big sister, so to speak, but it allows me once in a while to like scoop in there and see trends. There was an issue, a business issue that was, I'd say a very critical one. And all of a sudden I started to see in the chat, has this happened to you? Has this happened to you? There's a business issue. And so I saw a trend. Instead of them all like scurrying around, I immediately grabbed it, escalated it, and we got something really important solved. But just having it as a place to also be goofy, because the group is small enough and the jokes, the pictures, the thank yous, the congratulations is it's working really well in managing hybrid and remote salespeople. That's number one. The second is I encourage my team to be very vocal on escalating their needs so that no one's on an island. So we are a culture of escalate, 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 customer obsession. We get our needs met. We're not going to let things linger. And so the team doesn't need to catch somebody in the hallway to get something done or to get a decision made. So we create that kind of a forum, that I'd say those are the key ones. And then again, when you can squeeze in the in-person events. I will also say trade shows, trade events are like, they're starting to explode, right?
Mhm.
And so in your personal lives, you're probably seeing more like Broadway shows, or I'm out of New York City, so the Broadway shows are heating up, the live concerts are heating up. Well, guess what? In business, the trade events are starting to heat up. And not only is it a fantastic opportunity for us to interact with our customers, some of our teams that are all there supporting their customers get together, and it's an awesome homecoming and place that people can bond and feel a part of something bigger.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that we're reimagining in some ways how those events occur and how to get the most value out of them, because we kind of had to figure out how to do it virtually. But now, and even in our training programs, well, how do we do some of that that's good, like the online collaboration, the discussion groups, the engagement, but then when we're in person, we're more intentional and we use that time maybe even more appropriately, but right, because it's at such a premium. And I think that's an exciting evolution. Juliana, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think just real quick, agree, like all the different live events has been like so great. And we've seen the same thing across my team and our customers' teams, and so much excitement from everyone to see one another. There's a lot of like, oh, I didn't know you were that short, or, I thought because we've just been seeing people that we haven't even met in person before, and just a lot of really funny conversations that happen. I think the clients that we've seen that have the most success with the hybrid work is not forcing some sort of exact schedule. And I know that was happening kind of a number of months ago, but it became even harder and more stressful for people to be like, oh, I have to be there on Tuesdays, Thursdays. And those are the days that were like the worst for me, because I also have to drop my kid off or, something in the afternoon. And now I have to like pack up my stuff and make sure I can, so I think that was an unintentional, like, extra stress for people that was happening from a lot of companies. And so I would say, if you're looking at hybrid or trying to figure out how it works, forcing those things isn't necessarily the answer for, strong mental health and strong individual success, but offering the options and being able to get together with team members when it makes sense to get in the office and collaborate together, or not, or go in and have some quiet space, because I know I need it every day after 3 because my kids come in and they're super loud. And, just to be able to have those extra hours, I think that makes a big difference for people. And without the enforcement of some really kind of strict schedule, because that just doesn't work for people.
Yeah, and using that time. I mean, we're actually finding our team is kind of self-managing or taking the instigation to get together and collaborate if they're working on a project together, right?
Yeah.
They know, hey, it's more helpful to go to the whiteboard and be able to do that. So I think that's going to evolve, but I think listening, understanding the individuals, as you said, and being able to respond appropriately. So look, I know we've covered a ton of ground. We're coming up on the top of the hour. We could probably spend another hour, and I would love to do that, but I know you both need to get on with your day as well as our audience. So, we started talking about why retention is something we should pay attention to, and even as the inverse of, if it's hard to find talent, let's keep the talent we have and build a path where they want to stay, build an organization where they want to be part of. Then we talked a little bit about specifically keeping women engaged and involved, and what does that path look for? And I love that discussion. And again, that could be a next webinar just in itself. And then really talking about mental health and burnout and some of the things we can do, and just fantastic insights there. And then, kind of closing it out on managing the hybrid in this blended world that we're living in. So again, great insights. I'll just give you closing thoughts. Chris, anything to add to take us home?
Yeah, I mean, the topic of retention, it's all about leading with empathy, being authentic, making your organization a destination, not a pit stop where people can continue to learn and grow their careers, and have fun.
That's great. Very well said. Juliana?
I think just make space for the conversations that need to be had.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest things to do when we're so busy, and I find it to be the most like vital.